Everyone, it is the Banta Guy here, and welcome back to another movie review. Today we are reviewing The Hobbit, Battle of the Five Armies, and to tell you the truth, it's not what I expected, but I digress. Remember I said that for The Hobbit Unexpected Journey I went to see it at high frame rate in 3D, and I liked it, supposedly? Well, I wasn't really telling you the whole truth. I mean, I liked it in a way because it was smoother, but I also disliked it because it made everything look kind of slightly dodgy, like a bad TV show kind of look. Slightly. It made everything look a bit funny. But now that I've seen it again for The Hobbit Battle of the Five Armies, I've made my definitive decision on it. I am never ever seeing it again because HFR, high frame rate, is garbage. Simply, it's not worth your money. It's not worth the time. So really, now the only gimmick I'll buy into, like I won't buy into 3D, high frame rate, the D-Box experience, like these shaky chairs. 4D is also garbage as well. The only gimmick I'll buy into now is IMAX. You see the big screen that goes way down in front of you and way up above you. That is interesting because it gives you that wow, kind of that whoa experience. Preferably if you're in the middle of the screen. But outside of IMAX, I will not buy into any more stupid gimmicks because high frame rate's garbage, 3D's garbage, and yeah. Anyway, getting back to the film, how was it? How was the writing? How was this? How was that? Well, the film opens where we left off from the last film with Smaug attacking Lake Town, and this is where the high frame rate made me kind of be sick a little, because everything looked like it's doubly fast, if you know what I mean. So like, instead of them like getting on and sort of rowing at what you would think would be a normal pace, it seemed like they were going twice as fast. So instead of them going in the water with the oars, it was like and it was just weird. So, yeah, not a fan. Anyway, there won't be any major spoilers in this, but there might be a few minor ones. So if you don't want minor spoilers, do not watch this review. There will be no major spoilers because major spoilers suck, let's be honest. So basically, there's a long action sequence where Bard is getting a black arrow, or where he's fighting Smaug with normal arrows, and then his son brings him a black arrow. And he uses his son and the two beams at the top of the tower to sort of make a makeshift catapult, and it's this really kind of interesting bonding scene where he actually aims directly at where Smaug's scale had come apart, and he fires a black arrow directly into it, and Smaug is now dead. Now, to be honest, given the description of the film, Smaug was mentioned twice at the View Cinema things, and he was also mentioned on the online description. So I thought he'd be in the film for more than about 5 minutes. Unfortunately, he was not. Anyway, after that scene, basically it's a big free-for-all when they get back onto the beaches to save what they can, salvage what they can. And this character Alfred, basically the Master's servant, is like Griemer Wormtongue 2.0. He's such a little prick. You just want to... Like, most of the film, I just wanted a troll to batter him to death. That's how annoying he is. He's like that kid from Game of Thrones, the little King Joffrey twat. Anyway, moving on. So then we cut to Thorin and the dwarves. He's still asking them to look for the Arkenstone. We already know Bilbo has found it from the last film, but Thorin doesn't know that, and so basically he's kind of slipping into the madness of his father, or his grandfather Thror, and so it's a kind of there's an inner conflict there. But that's one of the problems with the film, is that a lot of the inner conflicts that characters go through, like Bilbo, Thorin, Thranduil, they all seem to be resolved far too quickly and not very realistically. And it makes me think that by the end of the film they were running out of material, they were rushing to get it out, because everything feels a little rushed in the film. And that's one of the things that dragged the experience down for me, was it felt like they were trying to tie up all the loose ends too quickly and they were running out of material while they did it. So everything felt a little rushed. Then the first army sort of appears, and that's basically Thranduil's army of elves. And they bring the people of Lake Town some aid. The people of Lake Town and Thranduil join up to try and extort what they wanted from the dwarves. Thranduil wants these white gems of starlight that belong to Mirkwood, and Bard just wants, now the unofficial sire of the Lake Town people wants just a share of the gold to help rebuild their lives, salvage what they can, food and so on. So then after that, basically, another army comes in later after a number of events, mainly starring the whole like Bilbo plot of swapping the Arkenstone around because that's what uh, Thorin wants more than anything. He wants the Arkenstone to give him the true right of the king. And basically, when it's all like nearly done, basically the standoff between the elves and dwarves, then one of the best bits of the film happens, and we get Billy Connolly riding a ram as King Dane, leading the dwarves of the Iron Hills. And I howled laughter along with the rest of the theatre. It was so surreal, but it still fit because Dane was kind of mad. And Billy Connolly just suits the role so much. It's like his first line is he just looks at the others. He's like, "Oh well, isn't this lovely? Now, if you would all do us a favour and sod off." And I just, oh goodness, the smirk on my face was probably ear to ear almost. It was just hilarious to see. So I loved that. But then, obviously, the orc armies of Gundabad and the Misty Mountains start a big fight, and basically then, you have a heroic scene where the men of Lake Town, the dwarves, and the elves team up to fight off the orc armies. And then obviously this is the Battle of the Five Armies, so basically there's trolls who are mounting catapults to destroy what was left of Dale and cut off any retreat. The men of Dale go back to try and fight that. Meanwhile, all this is going on, Galadriel, Elrond and Saruman go to help Gandalf escape Dol Guldur, in the process coming across Sauron and the Ringwraiths. Basically, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because, okay, Galadriel was one of the elven, I guess, kings or queens, whatever you want to call them. She was one of the three. But Sauron was a Maiar. So, or Maya, however you say it. Basically, he was like a demigod, as opposed to them who are just like a higher being. So it doesn't make any sense how she fought him off. I mean, I know in theory Galadriel is like Sauron's equal in terms of power and strength, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me because, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Anyway, basically we have this whole scene where Galadriel fights off Sauron's shadow and casts him into the east. At which point Elrond wants to follow. Saruman's like, "Leave Sauron to me," and then obviously that leads into Lord of the Rings, where you understand why Saruman sided with Sauron. Basically, because he's a greedy asshole. Anyway, then once Gandalf is freed, he rushes to. This is prior to the big fights, but he basically rushes to tell Thranduil to put aside their petty squabbles and get ready for an orc army. At which point Thranduil, in his creed and malice and bastardliness, basically decides, "No, I want my treasure." Blah, blah, blah. So then, then we have the big battle and so on. And the battle scenes do look really good. They really do, and you can actually tell what the formations of each side are doing, how they're being flanked. Like, in terms of, for layman's following how the battle progresses, it's quite easy to do, at least in my opinion. That said, though, there were a few people who don't play the Total War games who I was with, watching the film with, and they followed the battle pretty well, I think. Because afterwards they were saying, well, basically, why were the dwarves acting like morons? Yeah, I mean, that was kind of one thing. Was when the orcs first arrived, the dwarves sort of became a front line, putting themselves between what they thought were their enemies. Because basically, at the time the orcs first arrived, the dwarves and elves were about to fight each other. So why would the dwarves put themselves in a three-bread line between the elves behind them, who were their enemy, and the orcs who were in front of them, who were all... You're basically flanking yourself, and it didn't make sense. They should have just had them side by side fighting, but oh well, okay. Spielberg moment from Peter Jackson there, but whatever. The people who they put aside their petty squabbles to fight the greater evil, whatever. So there's that big fight that's going on between Erebor and Dale, while the men of Dale are fighting to secure an escape should they need it. Meanwhile, basically the battle progresses to a point until inside the mountain, Thorin is hiding And Bilbo eventually convinces him of his greed and of what he's become. He goes to remember from the last film, Smaug was entombed, or supposedly entombed, in a lake of gold. He goes to that golden floor and looks around, and then there's this quite good scene, kind of almost Shakespearean looking scene, where he basically melts away into his own gold, and eventually he wakes up to rally to his dwarven kind, and as a result the dwarves crush the orc armies between Dale and Erebor. Then Thorn decides to take Fili, Kili, and Dwalin to go cut off the head of the snake, which was Azog, obviously leading all these armies. So basically they're doing that, while at the same time Legolas and Tauriel are going after Bolg, because Bolg was going after Fili, and so on. All these conflicts go on for quite a while, but one of the immersion-shattering moments for me was basically what happens is, between these two mountains, Legolas crashed a troll into a tower to make a makeshift bridge. As a result, when he ran across the bridge, Bolg went after him, and so they were fighting on this bridge, and Bolg makes the bridge collapse because he has this big mace that he's making holes in the bridge. And then part of it falls away, Bolg's on the standing half, and Legolas literally, kind of superhero-esque, jumps from falling stone to falling stone to make it back up onto the bridge. It was so immersion-shattering, I almost laughed because it was stupid. I mean, Lord of the Rings had some of those moments as well, like when Legolas kills the Oliphant, or where he slides down Helm's Deep stairs on a Uruk-hai shield, at which point he then kicks it up and kills another Uruk-hai, which also were kind of daft, but they at least make physical sense. Physics didn't apply apparently, because what would have happened in reality is Legolas would have jumped for that second or first stone, whichever, and because there was nothing below the stone, there was nothing holding the stone up, it would have gone straight down, along with Legolas's foot, tripping him and then knocking his head against another stone, and he would have just died. But apparently physics does not apply in the world of The Hobbit. It was just ridiculous. Anyway, then eventually Legolas kills Bolg, looks for Tauriel. She's apparently okay after falling down like a sheer cliff face after she dragged Bolg with her, which was kind of daft. But then the fight between Thorn and Azog, the big kind of what I would call a boss fight for a video game, they're fighting on this ice lake, and eventually Azog puts a hole in the ice lake and starts making things collapse and crumble. Azog apparently takes a crap ton of stuff to kill him. Like, Thorin stabs him twice, then steps off the bit of ice that he's on, making him fall under the water for a solid 2 minutes, I might add, and somehow he's not drowned. Yeah, because apparently orcs don't need air at all, because that would make sense. And then he crashes back up from under the ice, which, how the hell did he do that when he slipped off the ice in the first place? I don't know. And then basically stabs Thorin in the foot. Thorin retaliates, kills him, and yeah. But Azog is just an immersion going far off into the distance, because that made no sense at all. So, Azog is defeated. Now, there are some major spoilers that I missed out there. A number of, maybe some of your favourite characters, maybe some of your least favourite characters die. You be the judge when you see the film. But those were kind of some depressing moments. Then Bilbo rejoices with the rest of the dwarves. Feasts will be, had, and songs will be sung, and so on, was what Balin was telling him. Then Bilbo goes off back to the Shire, where he finds the Satchel Bagginses have taken some of his stuff, and one of them is the classic moment from the Synod edition of Fellowship, where Bilbo goes, "She's trying to make off with 20 of my silver spoons," and it was funny. And it feeds directly into Lord of the Rings very well, because you see this transition where Bilbo, the young one, played by Martin Freeman, takes out his ring and just sort of holds it, and then it transfers to I think it's maybe 50 or 60 years later when he's 111, and back when he's in the Bilbo that we all know, the old one from Fellowship and Return of the King, and he comes up to Gandalf because there's that scene where he goes, "No, thank you, we don't want any more well-wishers, visitors, or distant relations." And then Gandalf says, "But what about very old friends?" And then, it feeds directly into Lord of the Rings beautifully, which I'm very pleased about, because it hasn't shattered my love of those films at all. which I'm very glad about, because some of the moments in The Hobbit Battle of the Five Armies really did shatter my love for the franchise. Like those moments with Legolas. A couple of, like the elves, like hundreds of them died to orcs. Yet somehow Legolas, like some advanced superhero elf fighter. I mean, I know he's Thranduil's son, I know he's in Lord of the Rings, but you don't need to make him so frickin' invincible. We already kind of guessed at that from Lord of the Rings. Although that said, I wonder, because Legolas is supposedly 7,000 years old, so I guess maybe he would have had 7,000 years of fighting experience, I don't know. But it seems very strange to me. Anyway, so the film ends, feeding directly into Lord of the Rings beautifully, as I said. So, pros and cons of the film. Pros, the battle scenes look good. All the orcs, aside from Bolg and Azog, obviously the two pale ones. Why? I mean, because the CG for those orcs looks fake. It looks fake, and that's nothing to do with the high frame rate. The high frame rate kind of makes everything have this fake, subtle outlook on everything. But like, even by those standards, Azog and Bolg look fake. I don't know what it was, whether it was the makeup, whether it was their battle damage, whether it was their outfits, what I don't know what it was. They just looked fake. Like they were in big rubber suits, is what it felt like. So basically, yeah, aside from that, the CGI was good. The CGI on the elves, the orcs, the dwarves, Smaug obviously still had that good CGI from the last film, even if his voice looked a bit, or seemed to be going a bit fast, but that was probably because of the high frame rate nonsense again. But yeah, overall, so it was pretty good. And plus, I loved the inner conflict of Thranduil, because his son loves Toriel, but Toriel loves Keely, and Keely loves her, and his Legolas loves Toriel, and Thranduil's battling because he banished Toriel for disobeying his orders, but he doesn't want to banish his son because he loves her, and so that inner conflict was good. And the inner conflict with Thorin between the treasure or his honour, between the treasure or the people who he promised gold to, and that conflict was good. The conflict of Bilbo, whether or not to give Thorin the Arkenstone and make him, drive him mad, because as Smaug said in the last film,
I'm almost tempted to let you take it and drive him mad.
And it's very it's very well done, all that conflict. The problem was that the conflict, it's getting into the cons here, the conflict seemed to be resolved a bit too easily. It felt everything was a bit cheap by the end. Some of the conflicts resolved just seemed a bit, well, I'll throw that in at the end. Plus, some of the immersion-breaking moments were also, they were ones that made me sort of almost want to howl laughter and smirk, but also cringe and shudder at the fact that this is supposed to be a franchise I love, and they're just kind of spitting on it with stupid stuff like this. So, yeah, overall, it was a good film. It was enjoyable, but things brought it back. Obviously, I really enjoyed Billy Connolly as Dane. Nothing about that was bad at all, because it was just hilarious. Although some of his headbutts looked a bit, fake and a bit too choreographed and a bit not too hard, as if, like, basically just tapping him with his head knocks them out or some nonsense like that. That seemed a bit daft. But outside of that, it was enjoyable. But there's one last thing I have to cover, which was some of these moments where basically the heroes were too overpowered. Like, you could take out, okay, so the elves could take out maybe 2 or 3 orcs per elf, and there's just so many orcs to go round, so it doesn't make a difference. But, like, Legolas can kill trolls at a whim, can kill Bolg at a whim, can kill all these orcs at a whim. I mean, the most he ever got was kind of thrown against the wall. And the fact that Toriel was a more realistic character, despite the fact she still had those kind of really advanced fighting skills, was some of the characters just seemed a bit overpowered. And there's this one scene where Thorin gets on a ram with Dwalin and a few other dwarves, and they basically just ram through, like, a direct spear wall of orcs. Now, I'm sorry, but some of this stuff just seems a bit too daft and a bit too hammy, and some of it even seems a bit too Spielberg, in my opinion. But, so some of these weird moments just brought it down again, but, pros and cons, weigh it up. What's my final verdict? My final verdict for The Hobbit, Battle of the Five Armies, is 6 out of 10. Now, you might think, whoa, Banagher, that's a bit low. I mean, surely it deserves at least a 7. I really would. It's just that there's too many moments that make me think, oh, this film's kind of stupid. Or like there's this one scene where Bard gets on a wagon to save his kids. I'm not saying that's bad, but the wagon like rolls down at an astronomical speed, and he basically this basically crashes the wagon into the troll, and somehow a wooden wagon weighs more than a troll. Or at the very least it weighs comparable amounts to a troll, because it knocked him flying. He literally knocked a troll flying. So, like trolls, they can batter down fully brick stone walls. They are strong creatures, they're huge. How the hell does a wooden wagon knock a troll flying? Plus that, Bard somehow jumps like Superman, dun-da-da, and lands his sword directly in the thing's head. Or chest, whichever. But it was I mean, there were too many moments, like Legolas, like jumping where physics didn't apply, which just took me out of the film so much that it brings it down. That, and like the more I think about the Battle of the Five Armies, the more I think, you know what, the whole Hobbit trilogy could have just been condensed into one film called The Hobbit. It really didn't need 3 films. It really, really didn't. And the last film highlights that more than any other film, because at least in the other 2 films there was content. They were using a lot of the content up, and so that's what makes me think they were rushing it here. So overall, The Hobbit, Battle of the Five Armies earns a 6 out of 10. It's still a good film, and while a 6 out of 10 rating would be slightly above average, I think it's quite a bit above average. It's just there are so many negative things that bring it down from what it could have been. But they were just running out of ideas, and I think it could be condensed into one film. Anyway, 6 out of 10 for Hobbit, Battle of the Five Armies. It was good, but not quite as good as I was expecting. I've been the Banty Guy, I will see you in the future. Goodbye.